All right, let's talk Georgia Bulldogs football here for a little bit. Look, obviously, if you look in the world of major college football, and especially the SEC this offseason, there has been nothing but huge news and huge moves involving pretty much every team except Georgia, right? You've got Saban retiring, you got DeBoer coming down from Washington, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, some shuffling going on, some offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators being promoted, leaving, going to new places, LSU upgrading defensive staff. We can go on and on and on. But one of the common denominators right now through all college football very clearly is change and volatility, which in the short run really isn't good for programs. Programs are successful when they're stable. And that's exactly what the Georgia Bulldogs have been this offseason. And I think that's exactly why they're actually in a better position going into 2024 than they have been in a number of years. And that's what the fact they've been honestly the best team in college football the past 3 years. Let's go into this news and then we'll talk about it more on the other side. This is from Dog Nation. The teams at the top of the college football world haven't enjoyed much stability of late. Of the four teams to make the college football playoffs this season, three of them have new head coaches. Wow, that's ridiculous when you think about it. Just three active coaches in college football have won a national championship. Kirby Smart is the SEC's lone representative with North Carolina's Mac Brown. The turnover among upper echelon coaches some reflects a change at the top of the sport. The college football playoff will expand to 12 teams. The SEC and Big Ten will be adding new powers this offseason, like I already mentioned, and unlimited transfers and NIL are here to stay with little sign of guardrails being set up to curb them. This makes Smart's position in the sport all the more interesting and important. Smart is now the second longest tenured coach in the SEC. Stability is something Smart has preached. I think that's the key here, has preached in his time at Georgia, even before the sport was turned on his head. He spoke multiple times during the season about the importance of having continuity on the coaching staff. All 10 of Georgia's on-field coaches in 2023 were with the team in 2022. All right, going into 2024, they do have a couple of assistants that have moved on that they've had to replace. But the larger theme here is I want to focus on is Kirby Smart's overall strategy of continuity and stability. Because with the NIL world and the transfer portal world that we live in, and now add the massive coaching changes on top of it, the college football world is just blowing up with players moving all over the place in terms of stability, continuity, building relationships. It just isn't happening anymore, right? It feels almost like a kind of a weird version of combination of college basketball with the one and done and the NFL with the free agency moves that goes on there. It's sort of this weird hybrid right now. And a lot of teams have a lot of volatility and inconsistency from year to year. The USC Trojans look like a great contender on paper 1 second, and the next second they're terrible on defense and they're not a good football team, right? It's just the way college football looks right now. The one exception is Georgia. We talk about stability, we talk about consistency, we talk about continuity that Kirby Smart has preached. And the reality is that's how you win titles. That was Nick Saban's secret sauce. People want to talk about, how great he was at game planning, defensive, hiring offensive coaches and recruiting. Yes, he was fantastic. But the thing about Saban that was so good is that year in and year out, game in and game out, he was consistent. He focused on keeping a stable roster and continuity with the coaches. Some of the names and places may change in terms of the players and the coaches, but the message was always the same. That's why he always kept a lot of his recruiters in place. That's why he usually always kept his strength and conditioning coaches in place. Those were his disciples in the program. Kirby Smart is doing that in Georgia. And I think that is going to be even bigger than it was for Saban in Alabama because we live in a much more volatile college football world. And I think that will be Georgia's secret sauce. And that, of course, being, more talented than everybody else in the rest of the college football world. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on Georgia Bulldogs and this news involving them and their stability. But first, Bulldogs fans, look, obviously, you guys, despite having, I think, the number one recruiting class in the nation, have kind of been left out of the headlines a little bit. In the comment section below, now's your chance to get your voice heard. Who do you think will have the biggest impact for Georgia out of all the new players they've added this offseason? Whoever it may be, give us your thoughts. Let your voice be heard in the comment section below. But Miles, give me your thoughts on the Georgia Bulldogs right now, especially the fact they appear to be the most stable of big-time contenders in a very volatile college football landscape.
Yeah, Nick, I think this is unprecedented. It's just something people don't talk about. Everyone talks about, all the change going on because change is in the media driven world, the sexy thing to talk about, the thing that gets the most clicks. But what we don't talk about isn't, oh, is Coach DeBoer going to make Alabama, a more of an offensive powerhouse? Who's going to be the next coach of Michigan? What is going to happen with this team? What is going to happen with that team? No one likes to talk about Georgia has been the most stable team. Georgia has been consistently one of the best teams, like you said, over the past 3 years. Georgia is probably, in my book, by far the biggest, favorite to win the national championship next year. Georgia has been doing everything right for so long that people kind of, like you said, forgot about Georgia. No one's talking about them. And, I think, midway through this coming season, they're going to start talking about them because Georgia's going to keep dominating like they always have. I can think back as far as I can remember, you know, the Jake Fromm days, even before that. Georgia has always been a pretty strong team, pretty consistent team. Mark Richt was there for a long time. I just think Georgia as a whole has been a pretty stable program, and that's why they've always been very good, very stable team. But Kirby Smart era has really brought it to a new level. I think he's taken that stability, preached it, and practiced it as far as keeping his coaches, trying to keep all of his, cogs in the proverbial system in place to keep this team rolling. And I think we've seen the result on the field. This is one of the best teams. And I think that people really need to get their eyes back open to the Georgia Bulldogs because they are going to steamroll through this next season because of all of the change happening in college football landscape. The most steady rock is going to be the one that is going to be able to go the furthest, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs.
And especially when you look at the numbers, right? So again, this is according to Kirby Smart, who obviously wouldn't lie about this kind of thing. It says if you look at the guys who have left Georgia, entered the transfer portal to leave Georgia from last year's recruiting class, out of the 28 players they signed, only 2 or 3 are leaving after one season. That's really good retention. But I want to focus on another statistic. As of the time of recording this, according to this report, Georgia has only brought in 6 transfer players total. That is a tiny number, and that's actually a lot more aggressive than Georgia usually is. Again, a lot of programs are all about upheaval. They're all about bringing in as many transfers as possible, trying to upgrade the roster, bring in new guys all the time. 20 guys leaving the portal, 20 more guys come in. You bring in a recruiting class of 15 guys. I mean, look at Texas A&M. They had like 30 recruits, I think 2 years ago. I think 25 of them have left so far. I mean, it's been ridiculous. And that's major college football across the world, across the college football world, except for Georgia, except for Athens. And that is their secret sauce. It's stability, it's consistency, it's bringing in guys who want to be there and developing them and continue to grow these players. That will be huge for them because while other teams are breaking in new players, especially early in the season, trying to figure out, okay, which one of our new transfers, what role are they going to play, how many snaps, things like that. Georgia's going to be much more solidified. That will give them a huge advantage. They'll get in a rhythm earlier in the season, and that'll play dividends, especially as we're jockeying for playoff seeding, because I think Georgia's going to be a top 12 team. I think barring a disaster, that's just going to happen. So it'll be all about playoff seeding for Georgia late in the year. And I think at that point, their stability, their camaraderie, their chemistry that they've built up will really show itself in those big games. And I think that's why you can't bet against the team from Athens going to 2024. They're not just the most talented on paper, they're also the best team in terms of how they're structured and built. And they're the favorite to win the national title. And frankly, I don't even think it's that close.